When it comes to alchemy, a lot of people think of alchemy in the form of chemistry, where, in ancient Egypt, alchemy was kind of studied as in a similar way chemistry was studied, where it was working with different elements. And the general idea of alchemy was to turn a base level element into gold. And they believed that, every base element, so to speak, had the ability to turn into gold. Now, in psychology, they kind of took the same idea of alchemy and pretty much applied it to the unconscious and conscious, right? There's psychologists that have basically said that human souls are similar in the same way, where, you know, in the same way that there's different elements in chemistry, there's also different human souls that have different, talents and abilities that they're born with. And the end goal of each human soul is to transform into gold. In the same way in alchemy, where the end goal of every base level element is to transform into gold, right? And through this process, the unconscious merges with the conscious, right? And they refer to this similar to the alchemical marriage, right? Where two counterparts unionize together to create one counterpart, right? So this is basically referring to the fact that alchemy actually has a lot of applications in human psychology and the soul, right? We can learn a lot about the human soul and human psychology by studying ancient alchemy. And a lot of alchemy isn't really talking about the soul. It is literally talking about turning base level elements into gold, right? Upgrading base level elements and upgrading them into more improved versions of themselves, right? So the general idea when it comes to karma and reincarnation is, in the general sense, we are all human souls using our bodies as vessels to basically put our soul through spiritual transformation and evolution. And through each life and reincarnated life we experience here on Earth, we get to further advance our soul in our spiritual journey and spiritual transformation, right? With the end goal of transforming our souls into gold. Now, once you keep this in mind, you'll realize that a lot of human behavior can be explained using practices that are based in alchemy, right? Where you have an unconscious and you have a conscious, right? There's a famous psychologist, Carl Jung, that said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. So basically what he's saying is you can't necessarily ignore your unconscious desires, right? Or everyone in society walks around with a mask, walks around with a shadow, and in this shadow holds all your suppressed thoughts, emotions, and desires. And, there's a lot of people that walk around in society that pretend that they don't have these suppressed thoughts and desires. But let's be honest, every person in society wears a mask, so to speak, and they have these suppressed thoughts, these suppressed desires, and these suppressed base level things that they want to say that they don't say in order to be functioning in society, right? Now, basically, what this means is, as a general rule, you kind of eventually have to face the music. And everything that you suppress, the more that you suppress, the more you kind of hurt yourself. The bigger your shadow is, the more you kind of hurt yourself, right? And you're going to realize that a lot of people are born with the subconscious desire to do things because this is in a way that we grow, right? In a way, we have the desire to do things in order to integrate our shadow into our persona, to make our unconscious our conscious. And that way, we aren't really controlled by our unconscious desires, right? Some people think that if they suppress their unconscious desires, that they can just control their life in a way. When in reality, the more you suppress your unconscious desires, the worse it actually becomes when it comes to controlling your life, right? And a perfect example I'm trying to think of is let's say someone has, the unconscious desire of they want to eat pizza and they want to eat junk food, right? And then on the outside, they say, hey, I'm going to go on a diet. I'm going to go eat healthy. And I'm just not going to eat pizza. And I'm not going to eat junk food. Now, this might work for 1 or 2 weeks where you have a guy who's on a healthy diet and he's not eating pizza and he's not eating junk food. This might work for a couple of weeks, and this might work for a month or two. But eventually, that guy's unconscious desire to eat pizza and junk food is actually not going to go away. It's going to grow. And that's because every time you suppress something in your unconscious, every time you suppress your desire to really do a specific thing, right? We all have thoughts sometimes that aren't our own, but when you have a strong subconscious desire to do something and you continuously suppress it and you don't let off the steam, it's going to start growing. And the guy's eventually going to start itching to get pizza, and he's going to start itching to go eat junk food. And you'll notice with a lot of these health influencers or these guys that are super obsessive with their diet, a lot of them have really big shadows where they're kind of itching to kind of like have a cheat meal or something. And that's part of the reason why in every diet that exists, there literally are cheat meal days or cheat meals in general, just because every person has a desire for cheat meals, right? And why do people have the desire for cheat meals? It's not necessarily because they need nutrients and minerals in the junk food, right? It's literally because sometimes some people get the subconscious urge and desire to eat pizza, to eat junk food, and they don't really care what the ingredients are. And if they don't fulfill that desire and the urge, the cheat meal desire and urge will get worse. So you can take this idea and you can start applying it to a lot of things, right? So let's say if you're the type of person who really has to speak their mind, who really has thoughts and like, okay, I need to speak my mind. If you don't speak your mind, and if you try to suppress your urge, it is going to get worse, and your shadow is going to get worse. And eventually, one day, you're just going to explode, because that's eventually what happens as you kind of dig your shadow more deeper. You're going to explode, and you're going to say something that to someone that you may not need, and it's under really strong, intense pressure. And that's what happens when you kind of suppress your unconscious. So the idea of basic alchemy is to basically transform your soul into its final evolutionary form, which is gold. And every person is born with different talents and abilities in order to achieve that desired effect. That's literally why we are on earth to begin with, to achieve spiritual transformation. Because our physical bodies are temporary, but our souls are eternal. So once you keep that in mind, you'll realize that sometimes you get a gut feeling, a gut instinct to do certain things, and sometimes God leads you down a certain path, and it's actually necessary for you to go down that path. And sometimes people are like, why do I feel the urge to do this specific thing? And a lot of other people don't. Like sometimes I feel the urge to really eat pizza or milkshakes and stuff like that. And I'll ask my friends, do you really feel the urge to do that? And they're like, no. But they feel the urge to do other things I don't understand, right? So some people are born with the innate desire to do certain things. And some people are born with specific talents and abilities. And it's your job to kind of find your journey, find out who you are, and go through your own path of spiritual transformation, because it's different for everyone. Everyone has a different way of leading their way to spiritual transformation. And that's what alchemy basically touches on, where there's a lot of different elements in the periodic table. And there's a lot of different elements in the periodic table. So naturally, the formula to basically change each element into its final evolutionary form, which is gold, the formula and the methods which you use, it's different for each element. And that's why alchemy is so applicable to the human soul, because every person's soul is different, and every person has different desires, needs, wants, and a tendency to do things. And although we are all different souls in the same way that they are different elements, our final form, all of our final evolutionary form is a form of gold. And we're not talking about literal gold. Gold is a representation of our highest evolutionary form and our best version of ourselves.